Terrilynn Dubreuil, traveling artista. Just to let you know, hablo español and je parle français. In this course, we are going to review and learn some new approaches.
You really have to think when you're doing watercolor. You can't be quite as intuitive as some of the other media. So I'm just laying a very light yellow along the ridge of that mountain that I had kind of decided the mountain was there. You see where my hand is. I try to keep my hand out of your way because I want light in behind the mountain. Then I can go up into the sky, bring in a little more water. I want it to wash more. This doesn't have to be as controlled. And just lay in some color here and there. Nice thing about clouds is they're loose and they play around up there with the sky. I don't want that green. Keep going into that green. Here's some yellow. And then the blue I'm going to keep separate because if I let any of these blues go into that yellow, it's going to become greenish. I'm going to grab a little of my ultramarine. It's dried out somewhat, so I'm adding some water to it, thin it down, make it more transparent. If I'm not sure, I can grab a piece of paper, test it on there. That's too deep for what I want. I want it a bit lighter. It's also very blue, so watch. I think you can see. Yes. I pick up a little of this burnt sienna and pull it down just into the corner of the blue because then I leave this area of that ultramarine blue still usable. But here, I'm graying it down somewhat. And I can see that main color right in the middle there. It makes a new color. Test it out. Yeah, I kind of like that. But I want it a little thinner. Add a little more water. I'm going to start up at the top. Just very quickly. It's dry. This is very dry in here. So I'll spray with some water very quickly to keep it wet and flowing. Also, if you notice this rough spray, this is the rough spray and not the misting spray. It allows this creeping of the color down in. And that's very cloud-like. So we're thinking clouds and we want cloud shapes. It gets lighter as it gets closer to the horizon. Maybe a couple wispy clouds running across through there. So I love watercolor because you are playing with the color and the paint. If you try to, you can do this. You can totally control watercolor if you want to, but to me, it doesn't have that nice loose flow to it. And that's where a lot of your expression comes in, is that looseness. And oftentimes, like that right there, I didn't do that. The paint did that. Let me zoom a bit in. This bleeding edge, I love it when the paint does something like that. It's so great. And then lighter down into the lower area. I want to soften that sharp edge that was there, and I'm checking over everything. And when it's natural that the paper ripples a little bit, little waves, because in the paper you're adding water. So on a molecular level, the water is fitting between the fibers of the paper, and it's going to push it to expand a little bit. And then you tape it around the edge, so when it shrinks, it dries out, it'll shrink again, and it will flatten back out. So don't worry too much about that. I like this dark area, but I think it needs a little balance over somewhere else. And while this is still rather wet, I can just drop this in quickly here and there. Try to make it an interesting shape, and also that looks like kind of clouds. It's not clouds, it's just paint we're throwing around on the paper. Yeah, I accidentally touched there, but hey, I kind of like that, you know? So watch what it's doing. Keep an eye on it and say like, yes, I like this, I don't like that. Maybe that needs a little more control, or maybe the paint's doing a wonderful thing. I'm going to spray it with my misting spray. just to kind of blend a couple spots together. That will allow the paint to kind of bleed together.
I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree and a number of master level courses from the university and the academies. I have been teaching for over 30 years to a variety of levels, in a variety of media, and almost any age level. But I really prefer adults, and I'm so excited that Artefacto offers us the opportunity to work internationally with other teachers and students right here online.
Now, if I come down into the mountain next here, right along the edge of that sky, it's going to bleed up. And I might want a little of that for the effect that I told you earlier about the trees. But I think it might be a little damp for that. I'm going to try it off to the edge. So very quickly, I'm going to mix some blue-green. I have some green already pre-mixed down here from an earlier painting. I'm going to check the color. I kind of like that. You want it bluer and lighter as it sets back. And I'm on the tip of the brush, and then I'm pressing down on the brush. After you do a little bit, go and change the color slightly. Pick up a little more pigment, maybe a little brown in here. So you get a nice edge on that distant mountain. That's working pretty well. So you're in this partnership and you're playing with the paint, and it's fun. I'm going to warm it up with a little burnt umber at this point. Bring it down in here. A little too much texture there, but let's see. I'm going to take I just added water to my brush. I'm just going to drag it across here to kind of blend some of those areas a little bit. If you had snow in the mountains, that would make great snow. I'm not after snow today. So see how we're building off what we've been through already with the photographs and then the sketches, and now we're going into the painting. And because we had practiced this design, we're more comfortable with it at this point. I'm going to warm up the foreground. Little dirt under there. The brown and the green will mix very nicely. Up here, maybe a little more blue, so it doesn't look like snow. This edge of that mountain. Yeah. Step back, take a look at it, see what it looks like. It looks very different from me here than it does on the camera. It looks a lot darker on the zoom. If that's so, and I'm using this as an example, not as a finely finished painting, I can take one of my paper towels. I can take the rough spray bottle, check it off to the side, quick spray. I was spraying as I moved across, like I'll do slow motion. This is slow motion, just spray across like that. So I just did a quick spray to dampen some of this. And then in the valley where mist would collect, I can crumple up a piece of paper towel or something, any sort of thing, and just lightly blot it to soften that. If you have, and I'm showing you techniques that you can use on your own instead of you just copying my painting. So I just took this, and if you blot it, you get a nice texture. But if you keep blotting it, the texture's gone. It just disappears. So keep that in mind. Try to plan ahead, think ahead, and then make your decision, make the brush mark, leave it alone. If you look carefully here, you can see the bleed here. You can decide, do I want to control how this paint is moving up into the sky at this point and this point? Or do I want to leave that as distant trees on the top of that mountain? So see how the paint is kind of doing something, and now I have to decide, do I want it to do that or do I want to control it? So if I want it, leave it alone. If I don't want it, I can make a shape with I'll get a clean paper towel, clean piece of paper of something, and you make it in the shape of the edge of that mountain. And again, just a simple press, hold, and lift, and that will lighten that area, and that can clean up. I'm going to do that on the tip of that mountain right there. See, now that's kind of that tree that was sitting on the tip top is kind of gone, and I kind of like that one there. So yes, there's some control. If you want more control up here, I don't know how dry it is. I can take rumpled paper towel, maybe press and hold for a little extra texture. See, there's a little extra texture in there now. Do you folks use techniques? And instead of just painting with brush, you can get some really beautiful textures in your painting. All right, so that's working quite well. We're going to leave this one a little bit light because in my sketch, I had the lighter sky. This is darker, maybe this lighter, and then this kind of darker. So you're balancing it all out. I'm thinking about what to do. What color? I've got blue, green. I'm going to make it a little warmer. Maybe cheat with some of my sap green and bring in some burnt sienna into that. That's nice. And you need to make enough color here that's going to cover the area that you want it to cover. But you don't want it flat color either. And I want this to be set back, so I'm going to grab a little blue into this as well. So all I have to do is slip over here, pull some of this in here. I'm going to add a little more water to my brush, skip across here. I've got a little hill there. I'm going to add a little more warmth. I'm still in that green, but I'm adding a little of this burnt sienna to warm the ground. Throw it in quickly, step back, look at it. I kind of like the light shining through, the cloud here. And the light, in this case, is just the white paper shining through the other colors. So that's kind of a neutral. So we're just working down over from top to bottom. Light, we have our lighter colors in here, and we'll work to our darker colors. And right now it's very thin. We're working with a lot of thin washes. The foreground, I want quite green, but not too green. So I'm going to pull in some of the burnt sienna, and where that is in the red family and it's part of the complementary family of green, it's going to soften and warm it up. Maybe a hint of blue here too. Yeah, I kind of like that. Is that different from this? Somewhat. I'm going to pull more green now to make it work. I'm going to use my rough spray again. So instead of spraying after, I'm going to spray before. Couple sprays. If you're not sure what it's looking like, tilt it into the light and get down so you're looking at what the water is doing on your paper before you drop in paint. I have a couple puddles. I have a brush pair there. So you can see now whether it's gloss or shiny or matte. And I want it texturized, so I don't want it too wet because I want it to skip across paper like that. So you see how that kind of skipped around? I kind of like that. It's working rather nicely. So I've worked from bluer, a blue-green here, a warmer green here, and a quite almost, you know, that sap green is quite a yellow green. And that's going to bring this forward. If I want, I can also add a little more yellow into that green. This is that lighter green I'm going to have, and maybe bring it into this central area there. So it's not one flat color in the foreground. Maybe a little softness back here. for variety. Step back, look at the overall design. These two white areas before, they're too spotty. So that's why I'm just glazing across. And a glaze is like you take your brush and you barely touch the paper. You just skim across the top of the paper with a flat color. That's a glaze. Where I am on this. Step back. So I'm mixing my green, which I already had on my palette, and a little of the burnt umber, because these are deciduous trees, and I had in my sketches already planned where to place them. So by just kind of touching this brush, look at the texture it creates. I'm going to turn it over and maybe have another little tree right beside it. So see how I'm turning the brush so it's not, if I don't turn it, I apologize, let's see. It's going to make the same mark all along, and see that repetitive mark? It gets boring. So you want to keep moving it and changing it up slightly. This brush helps leave a lot of the negative space for the sky behind it. It's kind of fun. And I'm going to put another little tree, maybe. I think I'll add a balanced one over here. So each segment of your painting is balanced. You know, I did that S curve through, balanced the light here, lighter here, dark and dark up here. So you're kind of balancing your elements. Kind of like a tree over there. That's it. Just a couple touches with this fun texture brush. Then I can take a thin brush like this and notice how it's going to make a difference if I hold it this way. See the thickness of the tip there, as opposed to turning it like this, and it looks very, very thin. I need to pay attention to that. So when I go and I pick up some color for the trunk of those trees, I'm going to look, see the hair? I don't know if you can see that hair. There's a hair on the tip of that brush.
Yes.
Very carefully, I'm going to get rid of that. So I need to test it again. And I can test it on my paper, my scrap paper. Looks like a pretty good line. I'm going to start at the base of the trunk, and I'm going to bring it up into the tree. That's it. Just kind of setting it down so it's a little thicker at the trunk, where the base of the trunk where it goes into the ground, and then just lift it up into the tree, maybe drop a couple more darker spaces in there. So simple. You don't have to be very, very careful when you're drawing these things. You allow the paint to be your assistant, and then you kind of go with what it wants to do. I'm going to add a couple trees in here. So then I'm going to drop in a little shadowy area. Now the light's coming from here, so my shadows on this tree are going to be on the branches away from the light, and this light's coming from behind these mountains here. It's going to be a little darker on this side of these trees, right? Because they're receiving their light each from a different direction. And if I were going to add shadows, I want it light. So I've washed out my brush. I've added a little of this lighter green. And I think, where's the sun? Okay, the sun's over this way. It's going to cast a shadow on a line away from it. So this is the angle of the shadows here. And I have very little paint in my brush, but I just drag out from the base of that trunk to create, I'm going to lift that. And it doesn't have to be strong, but it has to kind of be in that direction away from the light. But these trees, the light's here, so their shadows are going to go in the opposite direction. Sorry, I'm going to get my hand in your view. And we'll soften it as it goes away. This is another aspect that not everybody necessarily thinks about, but it's going to help your painting feel more real and more solid by being consistent and knowing where your light is. I want to add a little depth on the base of this shadow here, yeah. That's a little better. Right?
I hope you've really enjoyed this course. I know I enjoyed creating it and thinking of how each of you are going to find tools that will work for you.